Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vikshai, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. We are continuing our coverage of the Grudge franchise by giving the Grudge 2 the proper Scare Score treatment. I'll be going over the events that take place throughout the film while breaking down each scare scene and rating them on how scary they are or attempt to be. The Grudge 2 is a special film in the franchise. It is the final film in the series directed by creator Takashi Shimizu. It is also the final time that actress Takako Fuji appears as the iconic Kayako Saeki. But how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore The Grudge 2 and tally up the Scare Score. Our movie begins with a very nice twist to the Columbia Pictures logo. When someone dies in the grip of a powerful rage, a curse is born. The curse gathers in that place of death. Those who encounter it will be consumed by its fury. Ah yes, I just love it when my horror movies start with an ominous threat. We see a woman cooking bacon for breakfast as her husband berates her. He should have just eaten the burnt bacon and toast because what he ends up getting is far worse. She pours the bacon grease on his head and gives him a good old smack on the back of the head with the frying pan. Ted Beneke falls flat on his face and just can't seem to catch a break no matter what show or movie he's in. His wife sits down emotionless and finally gets to enjoy her coffee in peace and quiet. The intro credits show us the events that created the powerful, vengeful curse. Husband Takeo Saeki brutally dispatched his wife Kayako after discovering she was in love with another man. He also deleted their young son Toshio and their cat Mar. These events created a curse known as a Ju-on. Anyone who steps foot inside of the Saeki house is doomed to suffer a terrible fate. The opening credits are very creepy, despite showing us what we already saw in the previous film. We are introduced to three new characters: Miyuki, Vanessa, and Allison, students attending the International High School in Tokyo, Japan. Vanessa and Miyuki are the popular girls in school, and Allison just wants to fit in. The girls take a trip to the cursed Saeki house because kids really lived on the edge before social media. The house looks more like a traditional scary haunted house, and we see the damage caused by the fire in the previous film. Miyuki says that it's the most haunted house in all of Japan. Despite knowing the dark myths surrounding the house, they all decide to step inside. Vanessa references the events from the previous film, stating that Karen killed her boyfriend inside of the house 2 years ago. Vanessa and Allison go upstairs while a strange sound catches Miyuki's attention. She goes into the bathroom and sees a tub filled with black water. Bubbles begin emerging from the water, making her wise up and get out of there. They go into what I believe to be the most cursed room in the house, Takeo Saeki's room. On the ground, we can still see some of the tape that was put up by Emma. They tell Allison about the murders that took place and that Kayako's spirit now lives in the attic. They peer pressure Allison to get into the closet, and she reluctantly agrees for the sake of being cool. Once inside, she sees Kayako's diary eerily opened on the page with the eye looking through the hole. Allison is too focused on the creepy diary to notice Kayako is actually behind her. They shut her into the closet and pull out a cell phone to capture her reaction. Allison begs them to let her out, but they aren't able to open the door from the outside. We get a Toshio jump scare, and the girls outside hear a noise coming from the attic. Allison bravely keeps her eyes open the whole time, as I would have immediately curled up in a ball and pissed myself. Kayako's head descends from the attic as the "it was just a prank, bro" moment becomes a terrifying reality. Vanessa and Miyuki run out of the house, and Allison follows soon after. I have very mixed feelings about this scene. The biggest issue I have is that it's super cliched. The popular girls bring the girl who wants to fit into a haunted place to scare her, the plan backfires, and they all end up terrified. It's textbook cookie-cutter horror movie formula, which is sort of disappointing. With that said, it is executed very well. The atmosphere is super creepy, and Kayako's mere presence is enough to generate a very scary scene. Also, Allison Allison seems genuinely terrified and her scream absolutely sells it. This should have served as the film's opening instead of the Ted Beneke kitchen scene. The film briefly takes us to California as we meet our main character, Aubrey, Karen's younger sister. Their mom tells her of the events that occurred in Tokyo and that Karen is in the hospital. She wants Aubrey to go find Karen, whom she obviously likes way more.
I'm not going. You are.
Which also translates to,
"Is there a captain here who still has the courage to do his lord's will?"
Aubrey heads to Tokyo and finds Karen in the hospital. Karen is surprised to see her sister and starts to freak out about the Saeki house. They don't get to have a productive conversation before Karen is restrained by the hospital staff.
Don't go in that house.
I don't think she heard you from the other side of the hospital. The movie now takes us to Chicago, Illinois, a setting deemed appropriate for a film about a vengeful spirit from Tokyo, Japan. We formally meet the lovely couple from the film's intro, Bill and Trish. Trish is moving into Bill's apartment and is introduced to their friendly neighbors, the Flemings. Trish is greeted by Bill's teenage daughter Lacey and his young son Jake, who doesn't seem too happy about the prospect of a stepmom. We also get to meet Lacey's friend Sally, who's pretty much a useless character in an unnecessary plotline. Everything about the plotline and Chicago setting brings the entire film down a lot. Almost everything that happens there isn't scary and really detracts from the film's main plot. Guess where the setting of The Grudge 3 takes place? Trish tries building rapport with Jake, who is the central character of the Chicago plotline. That night, he hears screaming coming from the hallway. He peeks outside and sees the Flemings escorting a terrified hooded girl into their apartment.
Hi, Mr. Fleming.
Mr. Fleming doesn't seem so friendly anymore. He closes the door to his apartment and we see Toshio sitting in the corner scratching his knees. Wow, how did Toshio get all the way to Chicago? The film thinks the answer and build up to that is way more interesting than it actually is. Back in the more important plot line, Aubrey meets a reporter named Eason. Eason is the one who rescued Karen from the house fire, something that is shown in The Grudge 1.5, an animated short film that takes place between The Grudge 1 and 2. While strapped down to her bed, the lights in Karen's room begin to flicker and she realizes that that's not a good sign. A hand suddenly grabs her wrist as Kayako slowly appears behind her. Karen escapes her restraints and tricks the guards into letting her escape the room. She runs into a group of hospital staff who look at her like they've never seen an American psych patient roaming the halls before. She reaches a dead end and Kayako slowly approaches her as the lights go out. She retreats into the boiler room and we get a decent jump scare that was probably inspired by the One Missed Call hospital scene. She makes it to the roof of the hospital, but so does Kayako, who decides she likes the ground level more than the roof. Karen dies right in front of Aubrey and Eason, who briefly sees Kayako attached to her dead body. The hospital scene was decently scary, although, again, very cliched and a standard horror movie chase scene. The scene in One Missed Call that most likely inspired this one was way better. It was slower, creepier, and way more atmospheric, something I wish this scene could have had, as I feel that they really rush Karen's death. They also show Kayako a lot here. She appears numerous times in 3 minutes. One thing that made Kayako so scary in the Japanese films is that she rarely ever appeared, and when she did, it was much more impactful. We now see Allison sitting in school learning Japanese. I just noticed that the drawing on the board has a circled eye which looks very similar to the eye in Kayako's diary, as if she is always watching. Allison and Miyuki are still shaken by what took place in the Saeki house. Mar the cat walks between her legs and Toshio casually appears underneath her desk. Her classmates make fun of her, but she knows she's not crazy because Miyuki also feels Mar and looks back at her, and she's not the only one looking back. So, this is my second time covering this film now, and I've probably seen it about 4 times. First time I noticed Toshio's eyes inside the desk was while working on this video, and I literally said, "Oh shit," out loud because it caught me completely off guard. It's scares like this one that don't rely on dramatic noises and music that hit the hardest. Vanessa seems unfazed by what took place and is still bullying Allison. Y'all know the drill. It wouldn't be a proper Asian horror film remake without a shower scene. While showering, Vanessa gets really confused because her hair doesn't normally shed like that, and she's blonde. She gets out of the shower and doesn't seem to notice that everyone else is gone. She looks at some clothes hanging that look eerily similar to a woman with black hair. Well, that's because they are. The urine flowing down her legs confirms that she now regrets pulling that horrible prank. This was a standard scare scene that doesn't really do anything special, but for being the mandatory horror movie shower scene, it gets the job done. The next scene involves Miyuki and her boyfriend Michael renting a hotel room to get a little steamy together. She nervously gets on the bed as Michael gives us the second shower scene of the movie. He gets out of the shower and crawls underneath the sheets with her. She soon realizes that Michael's hands feel more womanly for some reason and that he's still in the shower. Very brief scare scene that doesn't accomplish much other than taking another name off Kayako's hit list. It would have been nice to see Miyuki get tormented a little bit more before her sudden death, but I understand that they just didn't have enough time given the multiple plot lines and shower scenes. Aubrey goes to Karen's apartment to cry and call their mom from her dead sister's cell phone. Isin reviews video footage of him interviewing Detective Nakagawa. Based on their conversation, this takes place sometime during the first film. During the interview, Nakagawa hears Kayako croaking behind him. Isin rewinds the video and pauses it, revealing Kayako's face. He then shuts off the TV to a cliché scare scene from a mile away. Aside from the obvious ghost appearing when the TV shuts off cliché, this was a really good scare. Seeing Kayako's face in the corner of the glass accompanied by her croaking was really unsettling. Isin visits Aubrey and tells her that Karen was being haunted because of the house and that the fire has made everything worse. They decide to go back to the house, but we have to sit through more of Jake's storyline for this one to continue. One night while lying in bed, Jake hears someone crying for help and banging on the wall. He sees the strange girl walking in the hall and follows her to the basement. He watches her dig into the trash can, possibly searching for reasons on why we should care about this plotline. The next day, he sees the girl taping up her window with newspaper showing that this storyline is supposed to resemble that of Izumi Toyama from Ju-on the Grudge. Trish has a phone conversation with someone named Nate that is overheard by Bill. He seems pretty out of it and clenches his keys so hard his hands start to bleed. I wonder what his reaction would have been if she was on the phone with someone named Walter. Aubrey and Isin arrive at the Saeki house that clearly looks like a movie set. Isin goes into the house on his own and immediately hears noise coming from upstairs. The closet is taped up again and we hear the slight sound of a woman crying inside. A deleted scene reveals that the girl crying inside is actually Allison. The house is playing more tricks with time and playing events that take place 2 years into the future. Outside the house, Aubrey sees Kayako staring at her from the window. As she approaches the house, she hears Karen's voice from the afterlife pleading her not to go inside. Good looking out, Karen. Too bad it doesn't work. The rules of the curse are never truly established, but that was definitely cheating. I suppose they tried to justify this when Isin said the house fire made things worse. It seems that simply being near the house can be deadly. Isin rips the tape off and opens the closet to find Kayako's diary. He finds Aubrey downstairs and the two leave the house. This was an okay scene, I guess. It all just feels rushed because there's so many storylines going on at once. This scene could have easily been longer and much more effective. Vanessa gets called into the counselor's office with Allison to discuss what took place at the Saeki house. Miyuki is now missing and Allison is completely traumatized. She storms out of the room and Miss Dale follows after her, leaving Vanessa alone in the room. She tries texting Miyuki and starts playing with the lamp on the desk. The light stops working and she goes under the desk to plug it back in. She reaches for her ringing cell phone on the desk but touches Toshio's feet instead. She picks up the phone and hears a cat meow on the other end. Vanessa rushes out into the street as the Japanese people look on at the American woman running away with puzzling looks on their faces for the second time in the film. She rushes into a phone booth to call Miyuki, but Kayako answers the phone. Toshio suddenly grabs her legs as Kayako's hair grabs a hold of her entire body and consumes her. This was a disappointing scare scene filled with cliches and scares taken from every other Ju-on film before it. The only shocking thing about this scene is that Vanessa actually knows Miyuki's phone number by heart. Isin reads through Kayako's diary that she's been writing in since she was 8 years old. Her mother was an Itako, a spiritual medium that could help people speak to their loved ones. He contacts one of his expert friends named Mishima to help translate the diary. Kayako can be seen standing behind Aubrey but transformed back into a pair of clothes when she turns around. Mishima reads the diary and gives them more more insight into the rituals performed by Kayako's mother. They describe her as an exorcist who took evil spirits out of people's bodies and fed them to Kayako. That night, they decide that they are going to seek out Kayako's mother in the morning. At Isen's apartment, Aubrey shares a story about the last time she and Karen spoke, which ended in an argument. She falls asleep and Isen goes into his photo darkroom. He takes a closer look at a photo with a dark shadow in front of the Saeki house. Loud creaking noises can be heard directly above him and the shadow in the photo starts to move. The water turns completely black as Kayako's head emerges from the water. Kayako stares menacingly at the terrified Isen and quickly grabs his face. She crawls towards him and consumes him off-screen. I thought that Isen's death was very well done. I didn't really feel like he was in danger the entire film, but the moment he stepped into the dark room, I knew he was done for. From the shadow moving in the photo to Kayako's head emerging from the water, this was a great scare that was much needed over an hour into this film. Aubrey wakes up the next morning and finds Isen's dead body. He grabs a hold of her and briefly turns into Kayako. As Aubrey retreats out of the room, we see all the photos have eerily turned into Kayako's face. This was a great scare with some really creepy visuals that I've come to expect from these films. We return to the unimportant storyline as Lacey visits her friend Sally. Sally doesn't look too pleased with her cheerleading outfit and downs a bottle of milk only to throw it back up immediately. Lacey leaves to go check on Jake and Sally drinks the thrown up milk. She goes into Jake's room and finds him hiding in the closet. He says he hid in the closet because Trish and Bill were fighting and he got scared. That night, he hears continuous banging from next door and goes to check it out. He invites himself into the Fleming apartment, which is a complete mess, resembling the Saeki house when Karen first entered it. He goes into the room where he hears the banging and sees the hooded girl cutting her hair with scissors. We hear scratching on the windows and two sets of eyes are seen staring at him from outside. He runs into Lacey's room to tell her what he saw and she calms him down. In Sally's apartment, she just dies. I get what they're going for. The curse is starting to spread throughout the apartment complex, but come on. Bill wakes up to Trish cooking breakfast, leading us to the scene in the beginning of the film. Allison goes back into Miss Dale's office and says she wants to go home to America.
I wanna go home.
Miss Dale says she went into the house with the police and that there's nothing to be afraid of. The ghosts of Vanessa and Miyuki appear right next to her and Miss Dale reveals that she's already been consumed by the curse. I initially found this scene to be a little silly, but I've changed my mind on it. The reveal is done pretty well, especially the immediate shift in tone once Miss Dale says she's been to the house. The noise she makes, while not as scary as Kayako's death rattle, is pretty unsettling in its own right. Aubrey takes a train and bus to go meet Kayako's mother. On the bus, she sees an old man playing peekaboo with Toshio, who is sitting right next to her. This same old man does the same thing in Ju-on the Grudge. It's pretty funny how Aubrey realizes that Toshio is sitting next to her, but chooses just to ignore him out of fear. She locates the Tori from the photo and the journal, which leads her to Kayako's mother's house. Kayako's mother emerges from inside her house, camouflaged, and reveals herself like Wyvern on the Flying Dutchman. Aubrey asks her for help, and we see a flashback of Kayako as a child. She had a really dark childhood as her mother would use Kayako as a vessel to store the evil spirits she extracted from people. This dives deeper into Kayako's lore and gives us more information on how she became such a powerful, vengeful spirit. Kayako's curse is so strong thanks to a combination of her childhood and the sheer brutality of her death. Her story is a really tragic one. Kayako's mother says that she is the reason she was killed and that the curse was Kayako's own fault, not because of the exorcisms. In my previous video on this film, I said that I didn't like giving Kayako this backstory and the reasoning behind why the curse is so powerful. I understand the reasoning behind it and I appreciate the attempt at giving Kayako a deeper lore. However, I feel that what makes the curse so scary is that it was created through such a hateful and brutal event. Adding that Kayako was fed evil spirits as a kid sort of takes away from the whole when someone dies in the grip of a powerful rage, a curse is born thing, something that is advertised in the beginning of all the films, though it does somewhat explain Kayako's lack of social skills. She says that Kayako's rage will never end and will only spread and get worse. Kayako then appears right in front of her and consumes her own mom. I I don't know why they chose to make Kayako emit a different noise, but it felt really weird. They should have just stuck with the iconic death rattle, and maybe this scene could have scored some scare points. Aubrey realizes that Kayako's mom is dead and that she didn't offer any useful information as to how to end the curse. Jake realizes that something inside the Fleming's apartment is negatively affecting the entire complex. They come home to their apartment completely dark and a mess. Aubrey finally calls her mother to let her know about Karen's death. Her mom starts talking down on her, and Aubrey works up the courage to defend herself. She's not only worked up the courage to stand up to her mom, but to Kayako as well. She goes into the Saeki house and speaks to Kayako directly.
What do you want?
She then sees Karen walking up the stairs as the house is showing her the events of the previous film. She follows her upstairs, and the film annoyingly cuts back to the apartment in Chicago, which really takes away from both storylines. For the sake of organization, I'll focus on each individual plotline for their respective endings. Aubrey follows Karen down the hall, but there is a clear shift in atmosphere as she approaches Takeo Saeki's room. The shift in atmosphere was actually a shift in time, as Aubrey walks in on Takeo reading Kayako's journal. The house is replaying the tragic events that created the curse, but has replaced Kayako with Aubrey. Kayako wants Aubrey to suffer just like she suffered, and Takeo does to her exactly what he did to his wife. Aubrey crawls down the stairs, but her escape attempt is wasted and history repeats itself. Takeo grabs her head and hands her a degree for successfully completing the Kayako Saeki Ghost College with little Toshio in attendance. As she lays paralyzed on the floor, Kayako slowly approaches her and claims her soul. Having Kayako appear in her human form was an interesting choice and adds another complex layer to the curse. I believe that Kayako's spirit is not fully in control of the curse. While the curse was born from her brutal death, I think that the evil spirits she was fed as a child have a huge role to play in the curse's intensity and power. Kayako appearing in front of Aubrey in her human form possibly shows that Kayako is actually remorseful for all the lives claimed by the curse, but is unable to do anything about it. 2 years later, Allison, Miyuki, and Vanessa enter the cursed house. It is revealed that Allison actually saw the spirit of Aubrey, whose soul is now forever entwined with the curse and the house. Despite not being scary, I think this was a very cool scene that really plays on the strengths of the Grudge films. The way these films portray time loops and how the curse weaponizes time is original and pretty terrifying. This was a great conclusion to a storyline that would have been even better if we had more time to develop Aubrey as a character. Back in Chicago, Jake discovers that the curse has claimed his entire family. In one of the scariest moments of this plotline, he hears giggling coming from the bathroom and finds Lacey's lifeless body slumped over the tub. Trish appears inside the tub looking very creepy as Toshio's hands appear and pull her inside. He runs out into the hallway and comes face to face with the hooded girl, who is finally revealed to be Allison. The cursed Allison returned to America and brought the deadly curse along with her. Jake realizes that Allison is the one who cursed the apartment and calls her out on it.
It's all your fault! What did you do?
Allison suddenly feels that her hoodie is a little more snug than usual as we see an eye directly behind her. We hear Kayako croaking as her hands quickly pop out of the hoodie and pull Allison into the underworld. Again, Kayako shows she doesn't care about your personal space. Jake is absolutely terrified by what he just witnessed and decides it's a good idea to pick up the hoodie and immediately pays the price for it. In the film's final scene, Kayako grabs a hold of his arms as a new mythical fighter emerges, Grey Hoodie Kayako, as the movie ends. In an alternate ending, we get the more traditional Grudge climax as Kayako crawls her way down the apartment stairwell. At some point, she decides that crawling that distance is gonna take way too long and decides to stand up. She approaches Jake and Allison as the screen cuts to black. There is also a pretty cool epilogue involving Karen and Aubrey's mom. She receives a package from Japan containing her daughter's belongings. She finds Kayako's diary and is taken by the curse in a pretty brutal way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the Grudge 2. This film definitely had its fair share of problems, the most obvious one being the Chicago plotline taking away from the film as a whole. I feel that having 3 stories going on at the same time made it so that none of them truly had time to develop. Everything felt rushed and underdeveloped, which is a real shame, especially considering that the entirety of the Chicago plotline just serves as a setup for the 3rd film. They should have reduced it here significantly and kept most of it for the sequel. With that said, the film still has the scares and creepy imagery imagery that I've come to expect from the franchise. Although it was clearly made to satisfy a more Western audience, Takashi Shimizu still manages to make this film feel like it belongs in the overall Ju-on and Grudge franchise. Takako Fuji's final appearance as Kayako Saeki is as terrifying as ever, and is still the absolute scariest thing about these films. While some of the scare attempts fall really flat, there is still plenty of creepy and disturbing imagery to go around, earning The Grudge 2 a fair scare score of 52%. The scariest scene in the film was Isen's death. I think that it's the most original and scariest appearance from Kayako Saeki aside from the iconic stair-crawling scene. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the horror mine. Y'all stick around.